In a world populated by new luxury SUVs like the Lincoln Navigator and BMW X7, the Infiniti QX80 is a throwback, and not just because it uses a separate truck frame and a naturally aspirated V8 engine. According to its window sticker, this is a 2019 model, but peel back the QX80's sheet metal and you'll find an architecture that debuted in 2010, back when luxury was still largely measured by quality of materials rather than the size of an infotainment screen. And try as they might, Infiniti wasn't able to change that simple fact when they redesigned the QX80 for the 2018 model year. Infiniti did what it could, adding incremental upgrades like a digital rear view mirror, but there was no changing the interior layout or the infotainment system. It would have been easy for Infiniti to wave the white flag and simply wait it out until the next generation of the QX80 arrived, but they didn't. Instead, Infiniti amped up the strengths of the QX80 and created this, the 2019 QX80 Limited. The QX80's always been an interesting looking vehicle, but not necessarily a handsome one. For some reason, Infiniti styled the first generation QX80, then known as the QX56, to look like it was two different vehicles glued together in the middle, and the second generation model looked like a very angry beluga whale. But for 2018, Infiniti made the QX80 interesting and handsome with this new front end design. And key to achieving that's a new hood that's 3.5 inches longer and an inch higher than the previous model, creating one big flat surface. The hood still has a couple of waves in it to keep it interesting, but the edges don't dip down like on the last QX80. That gives the QX80 a much more upright look, which is further aided by high-mounted headlights and an oversized version of Infiniti's double-arch grille. And the Limited trim also benefits from the satin chrome lower finisher. Overall, this just looks big and imposing like a full-size luxury SUV should. In profile, the QX80 has a classic SUV shape without any of that sloping roof nonsense. And to spiff up the Limited model, Infiniti's added stainless steel running boards and unique 22-inch wheels. At the rear of the QX80, you won't find a conventional rectangular rear window, but rather a curvy one with lines that match the front end design of the SUV. That's a pretty cool design touch. Infiniti's also added this chrome strip to the bumper of the Limited model to really amp up its bling factor. But the strength of the QX80 and this Limited model in particular is its interior. This cabin really does feel unique within the large luxury SUV segment. I can't really put my finger on it, but everything just seems so organic. The dash has this big curvy cutout that's lined in matte silver ash wood trim. The center stack is framed by these waterfalls of leather, and everywhere you look there's this quilted pattern that looks like a flowing river. And say what you will about this interior color scheme, but the materials in this Limited model are just beautifully crafted. The seats are covered in supple leather with these Alcantara bolster. There's contrast stitching all over the dashboard and piping on the center armrest. And Infiniti even went to the trouble to leather cover the QX80 Limited's grab handles. It's all just kind of pleasant. And that's also the word I'd use to describe the driving experience in the QX80 Limited. Infiniti softened the QX80 suspension by about 30% for the 2018 model year, so now it rides like a proper luxury vehicle. But even though it's softer than before, it's not floppy. That's because this QX80 Limited model comes standard with a trick suspension system that actually pump hydraulic fluid to the outside wheels during cornering, thereby reducing body lean. And as long as you don't drive like a maniac, it really does work well. Another thing that works well in the QX80 is the engine. This is a 5.6-liter V8 with an impressive 400 horsepower and 413 pound-feet of torque. So even though the QX80 weighs about 3 tons, it can go from 0 to 60 in around 7 seconds. That's nearly as quick as a Honda Civic Si. Of course, the QX80 Limited is nowhere near as economical as a Civic. With its big V8 engine and an all-wheel drive system, this model is rated at 13 miles per gallon in the city and 19 miles per gallon on the highway. But you expect to get bad fuel economy when you buy a big luxury SUV. You also expect to get a luxurious and spacious interior, which is also another strong suit of the QX80 Limited. Like the front seats, the second row captain's chairs are really comfortable. And even back here, I'm surrounded by high-end materials. I also get a full-size center console and my own TV screen. Rear seat passengers aren't as spoiled, but there is enough room back here for reasonably sized adults. But this usable third row does create a new problem: rear visibility. Luckily, Infiniti's thought of that. The QX80 has a digital rear view mirror that lets you virtually see through anything you might have in the back seat or trunk. That trick rear view mirror system works thanks to a camera that's mounted high in the QX80's tailgate. It's right about here behind the glass. And that positioning also gives you a really good bird's eye view of what's behind you. But there is this kind of dead area right behind the bumper where the camera can't see. But again, Infiniti's thought of that. The QX80 comes with an emergency rear braking system. So if the car detects something behind you that you don't, it'll automatically come to a stop. And that same kind of tech is repeated at the front. The QX80 Limited comes standard with emergency braking, adaptive cruise control, and lane keep assist. But the QX80 Limited also has a couple of extra party pieces. The QX80 Limited has the superhero ability to see through the car in front of you. Well, technically it sees under the car in front of you, but the result is the same. This can see 2 cars ahead, so if the car ahead of the vehicle you're following suddenly slams on the brakes for some reason, this can actually slow the vehicle down and possibly prevent a crash that you don't even know is going on yet. The QX80 Limited also has what Infiniti calls distance control assist. It's basically adaptive cruise control for city driving, and the best part is it works even when adaptive cruise control isn't activated. To turn it on, you hit this button on the steering wheel right here, and then your luxury SUV will simply follow the flow of traffic. If the car head speeds up, it'll speed up. If they slow down, it'll slow down. It'll even bring the car to a complete stop and then get it going once again. Those are impressive features, but unfortunately it's where the QX80's cutting edge just stops. In the middle of the dash, you'll find a smallish 8-inch screen that can't run Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. The interface also looks a bit outdated, and the layout isn't as intuitive as you'd expect from a modern vehicle. It took a lot of poking around for me to figure out how to direct tune the satellite radio, and even when I found how to do it, it didn't exactly go smoothly. The QX80 Limited center stack is another hangover from a previous era. Modern cars are supposed to be minimalistic and easy to use, but this center stack is such a confusing hodgepodge of buttons and dials in all different shapes and sizes. Let's start with the upper section where you'll find 3 different kinds of controls. There are buttons, a rotating knob, and then a little joystick if you move the knob around. And there's also some redundancy going on. If you look here, there's a button for navigation, but then right below it is a button for map. Isn't that basically the same thing? There are also 4 different hard buttons that basically do the same thing. They all bring you up to the car's audio screen. Of course, there's audio here. We'll bring up the audio screen. If you press radio, it brings up the same screen but just moves what radio on. There's media, which if you press defaults to the back DVDs, but you can also just pick a radio station from there like on the other menus. And there's also a disc button in case you want to listen to a CD for some reason. But again, there's a virtual display up here for all of those. Why do you need 4 different dedicated buttons for that? There are also issues when it comes to center stack ergonomics. Now, the climate controls are usually the most used in a vehicle, but for some reason they're buried down low on the QX80 center stack, and to make matters worse, they're really small. The seldom used info button is not only more prominently placed than the vent direction button, but it's also more than double the size. The QX80 Limited's gauge cluster is another letdown for a 2019 flagship vehicle. Virtually all of the other top offerings in the segment have moved to an all-digital dash, but the QX80 you get a smattering of analog gauges and then a tiny black and white LCD screen. It's at this point that we should probably discuss pricing. The base model QX80 starts at about $65,000, which is actually pretty good value for money. That's 10 grand less than a Cadillac Escalade and 20,000 less than a Lexus LX570. But this limited model isn't quite the same bargain. Prices start at $90,000, and this particular model with its fancy paint, some floor mats, and destination is $92,000. So there it is, the 2019 Infiniti QX80 Limited, a throwback luxury SUV trying to make it in an increasingly digital world. Even though the QX80 Limited is lacking in some areas, it does have some stuff going for it. I really like the new exterior styling, which manages to be bold without being shouty. And the materials inside the QX80 are top-notch with soft leather and real wood pretty much everywhere you look. And despite being an older design, the QX80 actually has a lot of semi-autonomous tech. But $92,000 is a big ask for a vehicle that's lacking a lot of interior tech. And for that reason, I suspect Limited might also describe the sales of Infiniti's new flagship SUV.